Thank you, Marcus. I really need to find the exit after hearing such nice words. I don't know who might get up. Hope you guys are having a good time. Yeah? Okay, this is a very interesting setup. I get to not just see in front, also look up, so it's going to be good. Thank you all for being here. There's a very interesting option on the other track as well. Hopefully you get to catch that video later on. But thanks for being here. Today I will be enjoying myself because I'm sharing my pain, what I've gone through using Protractor and WebDriver. Very quick introduction about myself, if this works. It's not refreshing on the screen over here. Interesting. Okay, maybe I'll just plug it out and begin again. Oh, interesting. Without having a demo, having technical difficulties, that's the first time. Usually it's with live demos, and I don't even have a video for this. Okay, let's see if this works. That also doesn't work. Very interesting. So while we figure this out, I was actually telling someone yesterday it would be fun to talk without slides. Now, talking without slides is going to be very interesting if you're especially talking technical. You want to share the pain. How can I share pain without crying and without you seeing the slides? So anyway, I've been working with Protractor for about 8-9 months now. Not my first stint on JavaScript side, but this was much better than what I thought it would be, given my first earlier experience. I've been doing testing for quite some time, by no means a master or an expert at any particular tool or technology. Working in services company, you need to keep switching based on the assignment, different tools, tech stacks. And what I'm going to do today is sort of share with you why did we really get across on using Protractor, what made me go on that path, and what are the things that, what are the challenges I faced, and what did I do to overcome those challenges, if at all. Okay? So let's see if I remember my slides completely. It's interesting that I've got two screens over here, and I can't see what is going on. Maybe this works. Okay. Well, not completely. It's one screen at a time. Okay, so single-page application. Client project, single-page application. Client built it as a POC for a workforce optimization type product. Out of that product, now that they proved that the POC works, it's good enough to fund it and make it a proper application that is going to make a ton of money, and also, of course, provide value to their end users. Let's get some help in making it a scalable enterprise-level application. User base spread across the globe, starting off focused on one country, US, America in that sense, and slowly, steadily expanding across various different regions as well. A lot of very interesting technologies used over here. Completely written in Angular, JavaScript as an application, all business logic, everything over there, talking directly to the database. And there were some shared services that were used for various different purposes. That's the context of the application. The tech stack, along with this, just JavaScript, very heavy data, a lot of visualizations, maps, D3 charts, and if you have used maps for getting directions or getting more information, the more you zoom in, the more details you would see. You can click and do various different things. So a lot of such type of interactions as well in the product. Because of such heavy nature of the application, it's supported, thankfully, only on desktops. There's too much data to have on a smaller device, so we don't need a mobile device support for that. But browser support is quite a bit. After all the arguments and discussions, could not get Internet Explorer and Safari out of that list. So it was Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer 11, and Safari. Though I still need to see the Omniture reports and see if anyone is using those other browsers. But that's what the stack is. Okay? Maybe I'll just plug it out. It feels weird. Everyone is just keeping on watching my picture over there. Okay. So the other very interesting aspect is that this is a product which is a multi-tenanted application. The UI application is built completely, as I've mentioned, in JavaScript. It is served independently to each and every client. Database could be shared or not as a server, but each client would get its own database instance in that sense. So data is really of prime importance, which has to be kept separate. Now, given all these different constraints, how did we really approach this? Given that we had a POC, we sort of knew what type of application we are getting into, what the functionality is going to be. Majority of our team members are developers. Most of them also new to JavaScript from that perspective. So everyone is learning along the way. Given that this POC was there without any test coverage, who would really build a POC with good test coverage, right? But now you want to start building test coverage as well. So my task was over there, start to build some regression around existing functionality while we start changing things, the inner way of working of the application, adding more features to it as well, and we'll build more coverage along the way also for that matter. So multi-tenanted application was very important. It also imposed very different types of challenges. How would we test this? Now, understanding the application, visualize, oh, maybe they can help me, maybe you could change the slides for me. I'll just say next, raise my hand and you can change the slide. That would help too. Okay, keep going. That's the one. Okay, one more click. Thank you. Oh, this is really going to be interesting. Okay. So given the nature of the application, what made sense from a test coverage perspective, building quality in, how do we really understand the quality of the product? We said, okay, we just need 3 layers of automated test coverage. Unit tests, of course. Angie spoke about that in the morning, so I won't spend too much time. But these are unit tests, not Java or NUnit. This is JavaScript unit tests is what it all had. We also had integration tests because there are some shared services, a lot of API calls going across, so some integration tests over there. And the top of the pyramid, the UI, functional UI test, where you want to focus on how am I going to get the maximum coverage in form of a user journey in terms of validating that functionality. This is our automated coverage. Nothing of this is really possible if you do not have dedicated, focused, exploratory testing efforts. Now, I'm saying dedicated and focused, but exploratory testing doesn't really have a specific technique only, right? There are various different aspects. Along with this, what we also did, because performance was of key importance, because of the large volume of data, we had some performance tests also built in, which ran as part of our CI, and that's why we have performance tests cutting across. Some of them might be at a unit level, some of them might be at integration test level, and some of them actually running from a functional UI perspective if everything is working fine. So performance tests, any NFR for that matter, potentially would cover across the vertical line of the pyramid instead of as a horizontal layer. This is what a test pyramid was. One more. Okay, keep going till the end of the slide. Okay, so we looked at, no, one back, sorry. This is going to be really fun. Okay, so we looked at various different options. I had experience in a lot of other tools, technologies, WebDriver, Java, or Ruby. Also, Cucumber is really good if it requires that additional BDD layer. With every additional line of code or anything you introduce, there is maintenance overhead and other costs as well. There's also WebDriver JS, since it was a JavaScript application mainly, but we still decided to go with Protractor, even though no one on the team had worked with it, because Angular supports, or the Protractor supports Angular applications really well. So it was sort of a no-brainer in that sense. Yes, a lot of limitations from existing skills perspective, but the value Protractor would bring to the table sort of makes it interesting. So, big disclaimer, right? Everyone on our team, no one has any Protractor experience. I've got 0 experience in JavaScript, and I'm going to start building a JavaScript automation framework using Protractor for it. So let's talk about some of the challenges over here. So the first one, okay. What is test automation? Test automation is a very deterministic way of doing a set of actions, verifying the behaviors or what the interaction of the state of the product is after that point in time. And you would keep on doing that to and fro ping pong based on whatever your test needs. So you start off at a certain deterministic state, you do all those actions, and at the end, you would say, yes, it sort of makes sense. I'm at the state of the application where it needs to be. But what is JavaScript? The power of JavaScript is asynchronous calls. It's built for web applications. You fire off asynchronous requests using callbacks, you would get the response at certain points in time, and then the further set of actions would happen. To add on to that, with Protractor, you also needed to deal with a lot of promises, and that's why I showed the pinky promise. My daughter taught me that one. So now it's a completely different way of thinking, right? You're trying to force an asynchronous language to work synchronously for you, because that is what functional test automation is. How do we do that? Big challenge. Next thing, what we needed to understand is how are we really going to go to production? I'm writing code on my machine as a developer or a tester. How is the code going to get propagated across till production? And remember, multi-tenanted application. So the first thing what we do is, on a local machine, on Mac, everyone is using Mac, we would develop our code or we would write tests. But there are a lot of other shared services that we need to get the local instance running. So to make it easy, we said, OK, let's create a Vagrant box, and we'll have everything inside that. So now there are two ways of running the app and running the tests on local itself, that's on the host OS or inside a Vagrant box, which is a Linux-based system. Next, now we need to get into our CI environment. In CI environment, any check-in that happens, the build would happen, tests would run, and tests of different sorts. Unit tests would run, complexity metrics, whatever would come out. Also, we would run an integration test. We have end-to-end tests, the UI tests that we have, and also performance tests would run. So this meant we have to change a complete deployment strategy from a multi-tenanted application perspective. How do we get that done? Once all of this runs, we know that the build is good. We push it ahead to the next stage of what we call sandbox or a QA environment, where more exploratory testing would happen. We are working the agile way, so exploratory testing would happen, demos would happen out of that, story sign-offs would happen on those environments. Certain client setups used to be done as a pre-setup before we go live, so all of that validation happening. And then, eventually, once all that is done, we say we are in production. We are able to go to production. Everything automated, single-click deploys in most cases, some aspects very tricky. Okay? So a lot of challenges here from a perspective of how do I run my tests reliably locally against, or rather, not just locally, in any environment for that matter. How do we really make that happen? So that was the first, another challenge. The next, we spoke about the browser support. In browser and OS support, we've got a bunch of challenges. PhantomJS, Chrome, Firefox, these were our first set of browsers that we said we would want to work with. Why PhantomJS? Because we were just not able to get any browser installed of the version that we want on our CI agent machines because that OS was very old. No one had any idea how to do that. So we said, OK, let's start with PhantomJS and see what happens. But as I learned in the last Selenium conference in India, PhantomJS is not really a browser. Of course, it wasn't new, but it doesn't really give the right kind of behavior. We also ended up seeing that the version of PhantomJS also meant that the way certain functionality would be evaluated or executed is different. It's not reliable from what you would see in a real browser. Certain computation, sorting, or whatever else that might happen was different. In Chrome, we used to see certain elements are clickable or not, versus in Firefox, it runs fine. The same test works fine. What is really going on? And it's not really a Protractor problem, a WebDriver problem, or a browser problem, right? It is the limited understanding that I had when using with these set of variables, how to really get across and make it consistent across all these different combinations that we have. The next thing that we had was from a build tool perspective. We use Gulp, and Protractor, the typical way you would run it is just a Protractor, give it a Protractor config file, which would start running the tests. But that doesn't seem to be seamless. Our other tests were running using Gulp command. If I expected developers and everyone to also run these tests, you don't want to have a different set of commands for everyone. I would rather say Gulp test, which is going to run unit tests, Gulp integration, which is going to run the integration test, Gulp E2E, which is going to run all my UI tests. It makes it very consistent and easy for everyone. But what we realized over here, 4 clicks, yes, perfect, yeah. What we realized over here, to integrate Protractor with Gulp, there are a lot of Gulp package, node packages already available. The best one probably being Gulp Angular Protractor, which takes care of just give it one command. It will do the magic of starting up WebDriver, getting the latest version of WebDriver, and whatever else required, start it up, and after that happens, it would start running the test. The problem with that was there's a lot of dependency. Now, if I want to upgrade the browser, Firefox browser support, I need to upgrade WebDriver version. I'm still on 253.1 for that matter. But to upgrade the WebDriver version, I also need Protractor to be upgraded, because these are all one node module with internal dependencies. To get Protractor updated, I need Gulp Protractor to be updated. And now we are sitting on one dependency over the other, which you cannot control. It's easy to just fork that repo and update the packages and use that internally, but how often will you really do that? So another problem over there. The other aspect, challenge from the perspective, how do I really use this better, right? So Angular directives, understanding what those directives are. So getting more detailed knowledge about the product itself and the technology is very important. Angular directives, custom directives for sliders or drop-downs, whatever we might have. Working with charts and maps is a completely different thing. And also, our application is a mix of Angular and non-Angular. So login, for example, will be non-Angular, and then you switch context. How do you really manage that better? Debugging, a big pain. It is so easy on the Java side or the Ruby side. You can just put in a breakpoint in the IDE itself, run the test, and it will stop there. You can do whatever you want. But with promises, nested promises, it became very, very tricky to work with this. So I still haven't figured out that solution. From a map perspective, it was very interesting to see, because one of the functionalities was, for a particular type of data, I load that particular data in the map once, I will see certain colors rendered. If I load it again the next time, the colors would change. It's a dynamic screen. Now, on what basis can I really validate this? I also spoke with Moshe from Applitools, and that time, again, this was a challenge, right? Because the data is the same, but if the colors are different, visual testing also is not going to give me that kind of validation. And this is one of the core functionalities of the product, so how do we really test that? It was a big problem. Also, there are different types of maps. So what type of data is seen on them? How do you interact with that data? In some cases, it's a key selection. In some cases, you have to select various different points on the map and create a region out of it and do something with that particular region. So it becomes very complex. So these are all the challenges. This is all the pain that I went through. Now, let's look at what are the different things that we did to overcome that. First one was simplified a build process itself. Let's get rid of the wrappers. Let's write whatever Gulp code is required. You pretty much will find a node module for each and everything that you want to do. In fact, it became such a joke on the team. We said, okay, do we find a node module to order something from McDonald's? We almost found it. There's so many node modules out there. But we tried to keep it as simple as possible. I just need Protractor and WebDriver. Let's write a custom Gulp task to make sure it works well the way we want it. That made it easier. The next one was deterministic test data. Now, multi-tenanted application, in some environments, we don't even have access to the database. How do we set up the data required in the systems, in those tenants, and do whatever else using the scripts later on? That actually, we went through a lot of iterations of how do we really manage this better in a deterministic way. Because again, automation, right? Any one field changed, and potentially your test is going to fail. It's very difficult to find out what went wrong. So we did spend a lot of time on the data setup. Next part is about building a lot of solutions and utilities on top of this framework. So there are a lot of different types of utilities that we ended up building for this, whether it could be in the form of page functions, it could be in form of, I've been taking a lot of screenshots to overcome the debugging challenges, taking a lot of screenshots, a lot of verbose logging, but if I'm running 10 different specs, I'm getting a lot of data. How do I really make that unique and easy to find and trace what is going on? So unique directory names, unique custom chart, screenshot names, environment configurations, a lot of different types of utilities. If you want, we can talk through this in detail later as well. The challenge over here was also in terms of, I need to upload files. Files could be of CSV or zip file. Based on the type of file, there's different validation happening in the UI itself before the request goes to the backend. So how do we really validate this and overcome these challenges, especially when you've got tests running in CI in headless mode, you've got different browsers you might want to be running tests with. So how do you really interact with that? So very interesting things that we try to do over here. I'm actually not sure about the time. This one is not. We have time. Okay. Okay. So, but the most important learning that we really came across, right, is you have to spend time in understanding the core technology that you're using. Oh, is that one also frozen? Sorry. Ah, there we go. Oh, arm is getting a good exercise. Okay. So, bottom line, the first thing that we needed to start doing, understand the technology, the tech stack that we are really using. Spend time in understanding JavaScript. You have to use that tech stack in the way that is best going to serve the purpose you want to solve. We had to understand Angular. We are on a very old version of Angular. Upgrading it is a huge task for us. But understanding that, understanding the roadmap in the future when we do decide to upgrade and what is the implication it is going to have is very, very important. Protractor documentation is very good. The reference APIs are very good. Instead of just doing Stack Overflow-based development, also look at the core libraries that you have, documentation that you have, and see how that can help you. After seeing all these different sets of documentations and learning about it, it started getting way better. There are some other challenges that we really came across, which typically you would have in any test automation framework. You want to run your tests in parallel, right? Now, in order to run tests in parallel, you have to make sure your framework is going to support it. You have to write tests accordingly. You have to write the code accordingly. Nothing is shared across the tests. But now, in terms of interacting with the maps, we actually needed to use a mouse pointer, move it to a specific location of the map, and click on it. Now, if I'm running these tests in parallel, many a times it so happens that the test is trying to get control of the mouse at the same time. It ends up clicking in the wrong place. So these are challenges that it's in some ways easy to say, I just want to run this in parallel. It is possible. Protractor, in fact, offers this out of the box. But there is a limitation from a product and the implementation of that intent side to make sure and understand how that would work out. So that was a very interesting learning that we've built something which is unfortunately not really used. Did we really solve all the problems? What do you think? I shared the challenges, I shared the solutions. What do you think? Yes? Of course not. Okay. There's still a long way to go. There is a very long way to go. The items that have been struck out, in fact, these are learnings that I got in terms of interactions with a lot of people who had gone through similar challenges in the last Selenium conference. Got a lot of interesting tips from them. I, in fact, also spent a lot of time researching and finding some custom solutions for example, maps, and it made it much, much more easier. And a lot of these things we've been able to resolve. So maps, using soft assertions where applicable, and getting rid of phantom.js was easy. It was deleting some code. So that part worked out well. But there are still a lot of things that we need to do to really make this scalable and maintainable. Most important is how can we get to root cause analysis much, much more quickly. Debugging is a challenge. Just doing extensive logging and screenshots is not really the solution, right? You still have to spend a lot of time going through that, tracing those set of events, what have happened, to understand what is going on. Because most likely, 99.9% case, at least on my framework, the reason the test fails is not the actual cause of the failure. These are user journeys we are talking about. Something in that journey along the way has not happened correctly, and because of which it is a cascading effect why the end result would be shown differently. Right? So understanding that is important. How quickly can we do that? We need to figure that out. I'm a very strong believer that test code should be of production quality or even better for that matter, which means you have to have good abstraction layers in place as appropriate, of course. You have to have good practices, use good patterns in your framework to make the code reusable, scalable as well. I would never have ever put assertions anywhere else other than my business layer in my framework. In this case, I've got assertions all over the place. In fact, my page object would be a dummy object, just how to get information from the page and do actions on the page. In this case, I have had to mix up my business logic along with interaction with the page. I still don't understand how to implement the same concepts from a non-JavaScript point of view in a asynchronous language to keep that framework layers clean. So that part is something that really bothers me many a times. I don't think my code is clean, but I don't know how to really make that happen. So I'm very happy to hear thoughts on how that could be done. Faster test execution is important. Right now, we are at a stage where it takes about 30 minutes to run our tests in CI. That's a very long time for feedback. I would like to get that down to 5 to 7 minutes. I have the capability to run these tests in parallel, but I have to find ways to overcome the limitations of the mouse movements. Is it just that I need to run all these tests on different machines and just mix it up in a different fashion? I don't know. I need to think about that. A very important aspect of the tests that we have, these are the only UI-based tests which are going across as a journey, setting up data, doing all those set of actions, complex set of business rule validations. We want to invest time in just doing view tests. Here's a stub, assume this is a state, or here's a mock rather, assume this is a state of the system. Just go to that one particular page, do that set of validations and get out. I don't need to have a long user journey to implement that. Once we are able to do that, a lot of these validations will also move away. We'll have a fourth layer in a pyramid between the integration and the UI tests. Okay? So it's still a long road ahead. The future is much more brighter than what it was probably if anyone had asked me 4 months ago. I see some light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train coming in this time. So along with this, there are some other set of takeaways that we had, and we very consciously did that. The most important thing was we manage risk. What do we want to automate or not? What is the worst case situation of this functionality not working? We don't want to write everything at the UI layer. So understanding that. We experimented and failed fast. Do quick experiments and see what is going to happen. But the most important thing, everyone was on board of saying, we'll learn along the way and we'll keep evolving. So our code base has changed tremendously over this time. There are some set of references that I have listed in the slides. The slides will be available on my blog as well, and I guess we'll be sending the links out to the slides with everyone as well, and so is the video. So with that, it has been a very interesting talk. Without using the clicker, I got my exercise done as well. So thank you so much for being here. I don't know if we have a couple of minutes. Yeah, we do have a few minutes for questions, if any. Yes.
You talked about, briefly, setting up data.
Yes.
And I just wondered, hello, one, two. That's weird. You were talking about setting up data, and I wondered what kind of approaches you took, because it's getting your tests, your database to that point.
Correct. And I'll share the approach, but please bear in mind, each approach is based on a specific context, right? In this case, it's based on my application under test. There are predominantly 2 types of data that we need to have set in the system for us to be able to do anything. Something in the database, in terms of certain sets of tables need to be populated, some records need to be available. Second, there's also a configuration option in terms of, let's say, for example, how many columns I want to see for that particular functionality. It is configuration driven. Now, these things we need to have in place before we do anything, right? So any builds and deployments that would happen is not going to change this configuration or the data, but any migration scripts that need to be run definitely need to be done. Any configuration changes that happen over a period of time, that manually needs to be applied to this. So we made sure after all this understanding what is the important database set state that is required and what is the configuration state required, and we do this as a one-time activity. In fact, there is plan to also write now seed migration scripts. We have introduced a new middle layer in between, where we'll be writing seed migration scripts or seed data setup scripts from a test perspective to get this done as well. So that would happen on every deployment. It will make sure it's in a clean state. Other than that, for example, if I need to create a new user, I'm going to first go and delete that user as a before test activity, and then I will start with creating a new user. So that cleanup state is also very important to understand how do we really manage that. And again, at times I've spent a lot of time in revising just the cleanup because it makes the next set of actions are much more deterministic. The data itself was specified from a test, execution, and validation perspective in JSON, because JavaScript reads that as a first-class object directly. Okay? Yep.
Were you referring to flaky tests also with your test cases, that sometimes they fail, sometimes they don't?
Flaky test was mainly because, and in retrospect, I can say why it was flaky in a cross-browser implementation perspective, on Chrome versus Firefox, for example. That was a poor implementation from my side, right? But it was a very weird behavior that in Firefox it passed because the locator was not really a unique locator. In Chrome, it used to fail because it used to pick up a random locator, is what my understanding is, or random element from that locator that I had found, versus in Firefox, it used to take the first one by default, which ended up working in my case.
Did you also have flaky tests to your environment or not?
So flaky test, I don't really believe anything is a flaky test. It just means that the application got into an indeterministic state or a different state than what was expected. So yes, there have been cases when I tried to delete something, it does not delete. And the next action when it tried to create, it says, no, sorry, unique constraint violation, for example, I already have this item, right? But the problem was not that the test was flaky, because if I ran it next time, it passed. When you investigate, I figured out that the successful deletion message came up way before the action was actually done. So it was actually a product behavior, sometimes with network latency, environment slowness, whatever, you might see different behaviors coming up. So it's very important to not dismiss any test as flaky very quickly. You have to try and understand it. You might find out something in the application. So in my case, it was not really a flaky test. It was something in the product not happening correctly, or I needed to do a better implementation from specific locators' perspective. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question not specifically related to technology, but you said you only use Protractor for about 8-9 months. So when you have a problem, how can you find help actually? So you know the Protractor is managed by Google, I believe, so are you talking to them directly, or where did you find the help when you need it?
So it's multiple cases. So Protractor is, in a way, it's just a library, right? The first problem I needed to understand was, or rather I needed to acknowledge, was that I did not know how to use it well. And that was mainly in terms of JavaScript itself. When I started learning JavaScript, when I started reading up more about promises and how callbacks would happen, or when would a promise get resolved, and then I need to proceed, I needed to read more from a Protractor API perspective, what is going to return a promise or not. You just have to spend more time investigating on your own as well. But at the same time, I took a lot of help from my developers to say, I know you're working on something else, help me with this specific aspect, and tell me if I'm in the right direction or not, or how could I do this better. So a lot of these utilities, I either built them on my own, got it reviewed, or I paired with a developer to build them, or find different solutions. Adding locators in the product was easy. I could just go in the product code and write it myself, because I started understanding JavaScript and Angular better to make it more testable. But there are certain other aspects, let's talk to someone and do that. And in most cases, it was just about, yeah, reading the documentation, because most of that information was there. Okay. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for this time. Hope you got some value out of this.